day in April 1945, the townspeople of Gardelegen, Germany, carried 1,100 crosses to a local barn. The crosses were for 1,100 fresh graves, the victims of Gardelegen. But these 1,100 were a small fraction of the 20 million men, women, and children murdered by the Nazis. 20 million human beings, equal to the population of 22 American states. 20 million corpses, the product of 300 concentration camps all over Germany and in occupied territories. Death mills that ground out their dead until the very day Allied armies broke through their gates. Those who survived could answer the roll call of all the nations of Europe, of all religious faiths, of all political beliefs, condemned by Hitler because they were anti-Nazi. And now they were free. The liberators had smashed through the barbed wire at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Ohrdruf, at Belsen, at Sachsenhausen, at Ebensee, and Ravensbrück. Many were freed only to die. Years of imprisonment, starvation, torture, and forced labor had broken them. They had been beaten down to live like animals. Far worse, for few animals had lived in the terror, hunger, and filth of these victims. People who once had been human beings, like you and me. When the Allies came, survivors were taken out of dungeons where rats had been their companions and vermin their bedfellows. Despite the desperate efforts of Allied doctors and medical aids, help came too late for many. In the hell of Auschwitz, Allied physicians study marks of the Nazi beast. Children and infants died the slow death of deliberate starvation. Allied leaders came to the camps soon after the troops overran. First was General Eisenhower, who visited Ohrdruf. The inmates demonstrate the Bach, a torture instrument with which they were well acquainted. This was just one of many torture devices of Himmler's henchmen. Military leaders were followed by church dignitaries like the Archbishop of Canterbury. And hard to believe. Such as dungeons where this sort of atrocity, 5 with operations in each box, was routine. Everywhere was the repeated, monotonous sight and stench of corpses, shriveled bodies like old bones picked over by dogs, piles and heaps like the litter of a boneyard. These are the foul, wretched remnants of human beings like you and me. Not all died slowly and horribly by starvation. Millions died quickly and horribly by burning in the furnaces of Poland. This is what is left of their agony, a handful of ash to swirl into oblivion on a puff of wind. Here's the Folterkammer torture chamber in Majdanek. It is a lasting monument to German scientific genius. Gas chambers were the principal agent of death, and their use was admirably organized. Prisoners were told to prepare themselves for a shower bath. They were even given towels to make them believe this story. But when the doors of the bathroom were closed behind them, poison gas, Zyklon, was released through the shower ducts. In Dachau, in Auschwitz, in Nordhausen, in Majdanek, the German Murder Trust standardized the procedure of slaughter. The death gas was always the same, Zyklon. Cremation was the chief means of disposal of the great mass of bodies. Auschwitz alone had 4 of them going night and day, like the blast furnaces of Pittsburgh. Having been put to all this expense of murder, the Nazis were determined to make a profit. The charred remains were ground up and sold to German farmers as fertilizer. The death mills were made to pay in many ways. Thousands of garments were stripped from prisoners. Women's clothes, infant shoes, even toys and dolls. Human hair, women's hair, cut before death dulled its luster. Methodically packed, it was ready for sale to manufacturers. Every murder mill had its storage room, like this one at Buchenwald. Each contained jewelry, watches, wedding rings, heaps of eyeglasses and gold teeth, torn from the mouth of the dead. These were the instruments used to pull the teeth. In their slaughterhouse, the Nazi butchers wasted as little of the body as possible. When Allied armies approached, the Nazis often tried to rush their prisoners elsewhere. Thousands were suffocated in overcrowded freight cars. Many of the dead and the dying were flung into the water. If the Allies moved too rapidly, the Nazis attempted to kill their prisoners so that no witnesses of their crimes were left behind. In Majdanek, in Ohrdruf, in many other camps, thousands were murdered just before liberation. This man was killed with a bayonet. Here's a typical German barn at Gardelegen. 1,100 human beings were herded into it and burned alive. Those who in their anguish broke out were shot as they emerged. What subhumans did these things? Here's one captured at Mauthausen. At Belsen, we caught the camp commander, Joseph Kramer, the Beast of Belsen. Men or women, they were the Nazi elite, Himmler's own. Amazons, turned Nazi killers, were merciless in the use of the whip, practiced in torture and murder, deadlier than the male. In the interrogation room at Hadamar, a witness testifies. The camp commander and chief physician are brought into the room. They can explain everything. Of course the prisoners were used as guinea pigs. Of course poison was injected into their bloodstream and they died. Herr Doctor seems surprised that anyone should find anything wrong with this. The camp cemetery discloses hundreds of victims of this Nazi research in murder. This was a woman. Allied members of the War Crimes Commission opened thousands of bodies. The record of their autopsies shows the same murder system at work everywhere. Slow suffocation, starvation, poison injections, burning, shooting. Hitler's henchmen tried them all. Mauthausen tells the same story. These dead were starved or shot. Often prisoners still alive, or rather not quite dead, were thrown among the corpses. Mass killing methods were standardized for efficiency. In Ohrdruf, shooting. In Naumbach, shooting. In Landsberg, starvation. In Dachau, burning, poison gas, starvation. In Auschwitz, shooting, poison gas, starvation, even for newborn babes. In Ebensee, starvation. In Belsen, shooting, starvation. In Nordhausen, shooting, poison gas, starvation. Leipzig, burned to death on high-voltage wires. A few thousand of those 20 million victims survived the years of horror. The faces of these women at Nordhausen tell the story of their sufferings. In Remsdorf, 6 women were found alive among thousands of corpses. 6 women with wounds like this, wounds as ghastly as any on the battlefield. These are children who survived at Auschwitz. Their parents and relatives had been murdered by poison gas. Most of them have forgotten their names and have nothing left to identify them except the numbers the Nazis tattooed on their arms. Olsen had a handful left. One of these men had his eyes gouged out by the Nazis. Ebensee's survivors were walking skeletons. Most of them couldn't even walk or crawl. In Offenburg, in Fehrbahlen, in Belsen, "13,000 people died in the weeks following liberation. For them, Allied medical science and nursing came too late. Nazi party leaders and office holders were commanded by Allied military authorities to visit concentration camps in the neighborhood of their cities. They were forced to see with their own eyes crimes whose existence they had indignantly denied. At Weimar, all citizens were ordered to visit the concentration camp. They were called from their homes, assembled in the streets, and marched off. They started the trip as though they were going on a picnic. After all, it was only a short walk from any German city to the nearest concentration camp. But there was no picnic behind the barbed wire. Death was the only one who had feasted here. Each and every one had been murdered on orders of the Nazi High Command. But these Germans, the ones who said they didn't know, were responsible too. They had put themselves gladly into the hands of criminals and lunatics. They tell you now they meant no evil, that they knew nothing of what was going on, or could do nothing even if they knew. The farmers received tons of human ash as fertilizer, but apparently never suspected it came from human beings. The manufacturers received tons of human hair, but apparently never dreamed it came from the heads of murdered women. No nightmares ever haunted those who lived near concentration camps. The cries and moans of the tortured were no doubt believed to be the wailing of the wind. Yesterday, while millions were dying in concentration camps, Germans jammed Nuremberg to cheer the Nazi party and sing hymns of hate. Today, these Germans who cheered the destruction of humanity in their own land, who cheered the attack on helpless neighbors, who cheered the enslavement of Europe, plead for your sympathy. They are the same Germans who once hailed Hitler. Remember, if they bear heavy crosses now, they are the crosses of the millions crucified in Nazi death mills.